right, good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I know some people will be kind of trickling in here, but I'll just get started here. And welcome today to today's MASA informational session on the topic of the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, otherwise known as PELSB. This session is hosted by Kurt Stumpf and Yelena Bailey. Kurt Stumpf is currently in his third year as the Pequot Lakes School Superintendent. He was appointed to a 4-year term on the PELSB Board starting in July 2023. And he represents Minnesota superintendents. Yelena Bailey is the executive director of the Professional Educator Licensing and Standardizing Board, the agency responsible for overseeing the teacher licensure and teacher preparation in Minnesota. Just as a note, today's session will be recorded, and the materials and slides and recording will be sent to all attendees after the session today. So thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to Yelena and Kurt.
Great. Thank you for having us. We're very excited to share with you all a little bit about PELSB and some updates. Thank you for that great introduction. I will turn it over to our board member to get us started. But before we jump in, here's just a visual agenda of what we'll be going through today. Kurt.
As you can see, our mission and vision are on your screen, ensuring all Minnesota students have high quality educators in their schools. And I've been on this board since July, and there's a lot of similarities between a school board and this board. And I've had a couple superintendents reach out to me with just questions regarding PELSB or what happened to a licensure. And I found I'm being a board member too. And so my job is to direct people to the right person that can answer their questions, because just like school boards, I don't get involved in the day-to-day operations, and yet there are some bigger items that we are trying to address as a board and try to work through, just as school districts, school boards are. So reach out if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, and I'll either help direct you or help you know what I'm thinking or the board is thinking. So with that, I'll turn it over to Yelena.
All right, thank you so much. So thank you for also sharing kind of our mission and vision to get a sense of who we are. We always like to start with that, and a picture on the bottom if you all just want to take a peek at our scope and jurisdiction. As Dr. Stumpf mentioned, the board offers governance for everything, and then they delegate to me the operational piece, and that includes those 114,000 licensed teachers. We also, as I'm sure this group knows, we do the operational work for BOSA, so we do issue those licenses even though that's under BOSA's jurisdiction. And then we oversee about close to 800 now teacher preparation programs in the state of Minnesota. Also, bear with me, I am recovering from a pretty rough bit of illness this weekend. So I'm sorry you have to hear me sound like this, but I'm happy to clarify or answer any questions you have along the way. We do want to flag for folks, and we start with, I think in these presentations this year, the host of changes to tiered licensure. As many of you know, this 2023 session, there was a big number, I should say, of changes that happened. This was really the culmination of kind of a 4-year campaign that our board and various community partners had to strengthen the profession, modify tiered licensure, deal with different policies related to teachers in the profession. And so some of that influences the nature of tiered licensure, so we'll go through some of those things. But I want to flag for you all that the infographic that people are very familiar with that Education Minnesota put out, there's a new one that is good just until June 30th of 2024. After that time, we'll have to create another one, and PELSB will take that over from Education Minnesota, so that the state is issuing the infographic, because there's some changes that don't go into effect until July 1st of 2024, and I'll mention what those are. So just a quick rundown of some key changes that are important to be aware of in terms of tiered licensure. This legislative session, we had a few things that happened with Tier 4. Probably the biggest thing is the elimination of the Minnesota-specific teaching experience, the basic skills exam, and the summative evaluation. So those are 3 key changes. Those are no longer parts of requirement to get your Tier 4 license. There are some caveats if you completed teacher preparation in another state, but I'll get to that. An example here is previously we had teachers, and we heard this from community partners, folks like yourselves. You have great teachers who want to come from another state. And unfortunately, they couldn't come in and get their Tier 4 license because we required they had Minnesota specific teaching experience. Well, that obviously doesn't make sense. If they have 20-year career in Wisconsin, they should be able to come here and get the highest tiered license. So the board advocated for that change. So now if you have someone who has that experience, I apologize for the loud noise. That is a dog that just pushed down a gate. I'm so sorry. This is the working from home life right now. But now that teacher can come in with that experience from out of state and directly get the top license, their Tier 4 license. So we're hoping that will help streamline the application process and also help as you recruit folks from out of state who are interested in coming and teaching in Minnesota. The next big change is around the Tier 3 license, and I'm sure many folks are familiar with this by now, but the biggest thing is the elimination of the MTLEs, the Minnesota Teacher Licensure exams. So the content and pedagogy exams for 3 groups of people. One are individuals who completed teacher preparation here in Minnesota, and a little bit later I'll mention the other side of that, which is the board's work around teacher prep assessment and the EdTPA. The second group are individuals who completed teacher prep in another state and met whatever the requirements for testing are in that state. So if there's no testing requirements, that's great. If there are testing requirements and they did those in another state, they don't have to take exams here. And then finally, for licensure via portfolio. So those are the big changes. We know that there's anywhere from 800 to 1,000 teachers who immediately moved up to a Tier 2 because of that. People who've completed prep or, out of state. So we're really excited to have people get that full professional license without having the testing be the barrier to keep them from that. The next item on the list here I will flag for you that I'll mention is related to the changes for eligibility for a Tier 2. That will impact Tier 3 consequentially, simply because we still have a pathway to a Tier 3 license. There's several ways. You can get it through traditional teacher preparation, you can get it through alternative teacher preparation, you can do licensure via portfolio, or you can do the experience pathway. So if you have 3 years teaching on a license without being put on an improvement plan, then you get your Tier 3 license that way. So that has remained, those pathways remain intact. So again, this is just another example to help explain, but no longer will someone be barred from getting their Tier 3 license if they've completed teacher preparation, but simply couldn't pass one of their exams. So for Tier 2, the main change, and this is what I was flagging for you all in that infographic at the beginning, will go into effect in the July 1st of 2024. And that's a change to eligibility. So Tier 2, really, I should say, to be clear, these folks will still be eligible for licensure. They'll just be getting a Tier 1 license. But this is the further differentiate so that Tier 2 is essentially for after July 1st, 2024, individuals who are enrolled in a teacher preparation program or individuals who have a master's degree or higher or equivalent in their licensure content area. Give me 1 second. So that will change as of July 1st, 2024. All those individuals are still able to, who earn their Tier 2 license through that pathway up until that date, still have several years to renew that license and to get their Tier 3 license through that experience pathway. So anyone in the pipeline will still be able to use those pathways. The other thing I'll mention that is not on here or under Tier 1, because there's not any significant changes there, but will be of interest probably to this group, is that we did make technical changes that allow districts to do joint applications with individuals for the Tier 1 and Tier 2 licenses. The reason for this is we've often had administrators come to us and say, we jointly want to be able to do this so we can have a better sense of data on this application to know where they are at in the process. And PELSB has been in the position where we can't give as much information previously as we'd want to because it's not a joint application, and when it's an application, it's not public data. So that was one change that we heard was needed, and we got that passed, so that this should help streamline the information as you do the logistics of trying to get people hired in those tier 1 and tier 2 licenses. So a small technical change for some, but I imagine for this group something that hopefully will be helpful to get more information and streamline that process. All right, so another key change we'd like to highlight for you is we finally have the BA exemption passed. This is something that's been pretty universally supported. I would say since tier licensure was created, but wasn't passed for various reasons. And so this is what the group that previously fell under that non-licensed community expert. So individuals who are native speakers of world languages, or who are visual and performing artists, but don't have a bachelor's degree, previously couldn't get any sort of license under tier licensure because of the bachelor's degree requirement. That's now removed. So if you're a native speaker, you simply get an attestation from the hiring school district. If you are a visual performing artist, they have the 5 years work experience. We'll be developing a rule to help give more details on some of this. But these folks will follow the same path as your career and technical education educators. So this should hopefully bring some of those community experts back into the classroom. So we're very excited about that. Right, one second. So as I mentioned before, the removing of the content and pedagogy exams was primarily for those groups who've completed teacher preparation or licensure via portfolio. The idea here is that because the board oversees accreditation and quality assurance for teacher prep, that there's no need for people who've completed that to also be barred from their professional license, simply because a test, which research has shown doesn't correlate always to effectiveness, right? With that said, the board then also convened, while pushing that policy change, an advisory group to help figure out better ways that we can assess teacher preparation. So part of that is related to the EdDPA. As some of you may know, that is a program requirement for candidates. So they have to complete it to finish their program, but it's not a licensure requirement. So we don't require any sort of score or anything like that for someone to get their license. What it's really used for right now is a way for the board, or the agency really, to assess teacher preparation and how well they're preparing their candidates. So it's how we look at the teacher preparation programs themselves, not the candidates. So we have an advisory group that's been working on recommendations alongside some of our MACD, our higher ed organizations. So in the coming months, the board will be discussing what to do with those recommendations and pass forward, and how we think about teacher prep assessment. Aligned to that, and worth mentioning, is that as many of you are aware, the READ Act passed last year, and there's a lot of conversations around literacy. We have, the board has been conducting reading audits over the past year, I would say year and a half, to ensure quality literacy training for candidates. So it's still in process. This will be 3 years to get through that first round, but we are encouraged by the work that our higher ed partners are doing to kind of shore up the way they're teaching these things, and encouraged by some of the things we're hearing from state policymakers on the desire to have funding and support there, so that we can have really quality trained candidates coming out of these programs. So I wanted to highlight that for you all as well. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Stumpf to mention this, I believe.
I think we're all aware of the pilot short call sub program. And if you're like me, the $200 a day rate of pace is a big obstacle for some of our districts. So I know the board is discussing this as far as it goes for our legislative priorities, but this is available for schools, and there's some requirements. They have to be in your district for 1 or more years, and then or an associate's degree. But this is available as of today for school districts to take advantage of for short call subs and current paras.
Thank you. And then I know, I will mention, because this is something the board is discussing, or the legislative committee, I'm sorry, has discussed at their meeting, gosh, 2 weeks ago now. Time seems to be flying. But we have heard from several districts that there are concerns about the $200 per day, simply because what that looks like in the metro versus in greater Minnesota or different district contracts is very different. So the legislative committee has discussed that, and that's something that the board will be discussing at their meeting this Friday, taking in that information, which hopefully you all know and see. The board continues to be interested in hearing from you all, so that when there is policy passed and things don't quite work the way they're intended, the board then can have that conversation of how to support changes that do what's best for our students, our educators, our districts, and our community. So know that that is something we are very aware of and that will be brought to the table on Friday. I think we're getting close to it's a lot of information dump, but I wanted to give you all this information, and then we're happy to kind of answer questions, and really hoping this can be a fruitful time for Q&A. But I do want to flag for you a few different grant programs that PELSB administers, a number of which are either kind of newly increased or one that's brand new. So the Collaborative Urban and Greater Minnesota Educators of Color Grant, or CUGMEC, we always get the worst acronyms. That goes directly to our higher ed partners, but it is funding to support teacher candidates of color getting enrolled and through their teacher preparation programs. I mention this because while that funding goes to our higher ed programs, we publish a list of who those recipients are every year. And we'd like to spread the word so that in your districts, if you know of aspiring or interested teachers or educators who might want to go to teacher prep, who are candidates of color, it's good to know those schools that have these resources, so you can direct them to those schools, and I can hopefully match them with those dollars and that support. We are also working with MDE to kind of streamline information for educators and districts on where all of the funding is, because we know we have some that we administer, MDE has some, Office of Higher Education has some, and it's not exactly accessible or clear to anyone. So know that that's a project we're actually working on. We also have the Teacher Mentorship and Retention Grant. We've done one cycle already. This will be available in the spring. This is for school districts, coalitions of teachers, and different combinations of that. This is to fund a couple of things. One is for your regular teacher mentorship programs. Included in that are stipends for your teacher mentors, or extra stipends for mentors of color, affinity groups if you're trying to retain educators of color. This program came out of the coalition, or I should say the Increased Teachers of Color Act. So it's an interesting pot of money because some of that money is earmarked to support specifically BIPOC educators, but there is broad funding for mentorship programs in general. I share this because, as I'm sure all of you know, I think it's about 2 years ago now, the law changed to require teacher mentorship programs of all districts. But again, what that looks like, how far along that is in the process is going to vary. So this funding is hopefully one way to help support it. It's by no means enough to cover everything. We continually get requests for funding that exceed what we have to give out, but it is a good amount of money. So we want to make sure people are aware of that process, or of that availability. And then the final thing I'll mention in terms of grant funding is the Pathways Preparation Grant. Again, not a fantastic name, but that is a small pot of money. It's $400,000, and this should actually say fiscal year 24 and 25. We'll have another round of this available in the spring as well. So in around February, we'll be sending out information. This is for tier 2 teachers that you might have in your districts who are looking to get their full professional license, and you need funding for either getting them enrolled in teacher preparation. That could be alternative prep, traditional, but the idea with this grant is to fund kind of alternative or innovative ways of getting people licensed. Or if you are interested in doing licensure via portfolio with them. What I will mention with this pot, and we didn't get as many applicants looking to do portfolio as we would like, is that you can use this money to fund, professional development that might help them put together their portfolio, or whatever that might be. We also have a brand new staff member who is dedicated to helping working with these districts or any district who has a group of tier 1 or tier 2 teachers who are trying to find those alternative or innovative pathways to full licensure. So I wanted to flag that for you all as well. And I can happy to share her information. This I know is a little, past due, but just making sure the word is spread. There were updates to legislation around reporting for districts around hiring and dismissal. We knew without having to ask that nobody wants another report to fill out. So we were able to make some changes to your STAR report to build this in there. So that's already being done by whichever staff fill out your STAR reports. Thankfully, it doesn't require a new report for every district to fill out. We have been kind of regularly sending out updates and news on our legislative changes, on rulemaking, on different policy changes, but I will flag for that under news and updates on our website. We do know our website needs an overhaul and we're working on it, but we're trying to do a better job as an agency. And I think this has been something the board has really pushed in the last year, and that I share, is just having more transparency and communication. So if you're not aware of that news and updates page, usually the information you're looking for should be there. So that is the end of the information dump that we have. And then Dr. Stumpf and I are here. We'd love to answer questions or points of discussion for you all here today.
Dr. Bailey, if you don't mind me jumping in, if you want to highlight, as I was thinking through the presentation, EdPost is sort of going away, and so we're moving over to a different platform, and that won't happen until whatever May or end of this school year. But do you just want to highlight for this group what that means?
Yes, thank you. That's actually an excellent thing I should have included in here. So as many of you know, we use EdPost as the state job board. We were notified that just for a number of reasons that wasn't sustainable for St. Cloud State, which has graciously kind of hosted and worked on that. So we put out an RFP, and a vendor was selected, Vitamin K-12, which is run by Chris Hain, who many of you know through his work with MASPA. And so we will have a new job board, and I should have the name of it in front of me, but I do not have the name of the website. I have it on our slides from our board meeting, but I can send that out to you all. It's being built right now, and the launch date should be with June 30th of 2024. So the idea is to align it with the new school year. There will be a soft launch ahead of that in the spring, and so we'll be sending out communications to districts in the spring to start to say, you can access this, here's this resource, start to get that information. We are working with EdPost to try to figure out how we can streamline this as best as possible, see what information we might be able to carry over. So there's more communication to come. It's still pretty new, but we made that announcement, I believe, at last month's board meeting. I believe it was last month's board meeting. So new, but we're very excited to have a vendor and trying to work on some of the capabilities we didn't have previously in terms of sorting and posting and some of the feedback we've been hearing from community partners. So that is something that we'll be ready to share more information coming in the new year. And I should say, I can't see the chat, so I'm hoping Dave or someone else is monitoring it, at least while I'm sharing my screen. I can stop sharing my screen so that I can actually see.
There was a question from Dean Kapsner. Apologize if I messed up that last name. Will EdPost listings prior to June 30th need to be renewed with the new vendor?
There we go. That's an excellent question. So I think we're going to try to catch people ahead of that. And that's what that soft launch, the intention is to try to reach out to people who want to do their soft launch ahead of time. But that's part of the work right now with the with EdPost to see what we can just automatically roll over instead of having to have people do it themselves. So ideally you won't have to, but that's not a guarantee. That's part of what they're working on negotiating right now.
There's another one in here. When does the $200 a day begin? Is that strictly for teachers, or does that include support staff?
Thank you. It's just opening up finally the chat. So the $200 a day is a current requirement. That went into effect, I believe, August 1st of 2023. So it's $200 a day or whatever's higher for all of your educational support. I apologize. As soon as I decide to focus on one thing, the dogs have decided that it's a free-for-all over there. Dr. Stumpf, could you maybe speak to this for once?
I think the question was, when did the $200 a day possibility start? Again, this is just new for this school year, where we as school districts could hire paraprofessionals who either have the AA or been in our district for more than a year, but we have to pay them a minimum of $200 a day. And like I said, we know that's a big hurdle and obstacle for many school districts. So it did start this year. I did want to also say, I did throw in the chat, the website for the new posting. It's under construction. I know they're doing some postings right now, but Chris does lead our human resources school personnel group, and he has a lot of things in store for this website, including some analytics, how many times your posting has been viewed, and some other, I think, unique features through the website that is going to do more than what EdPost does for districts. So that is in the chat right now.
Thank you for putting that in. I was just going to try to pull that up behind the scenes to throw in there. So you beat me to it. Thank you.
There's another one here. For candidates who qualify under the BA exemption, what type or tier licensure will they receive, and how long is it good for?
Excellent question. So they would follow the same journey that our career and tech education educators would. So they qualify for all 4 tiers. The problem obviously being that for many of the tier 3 and tier 4 licenses, they can use any of the pathways, I should say, that exist. So they can enter in on a tier 1. They can get a tier 2 license if they do a non-degree granting prep program. They also can do tier 3, and we're hoping for tier 4. That's one thing the board may be pushing this year, is portfolio being a pathway to tier 4 license through licensure via portfolio. So they would be eligible for all 4 tiers. It's just a matter of what path they take. They also would be eligible for that experience pathway as well. So it would be just like career and technical education, where they can qualify for any one of the tiers. The only difference is they don't have to have that bachelor's degree in order to do it. It's a great question. Other questions? Well, I'm going to take that to mean that in my brief moment where I went to deal with dogs acting up at just the perfect moment, Dr. Stumpf answered everything, which is fantastic. Oh, great question. Yes. So should I read this question out, Dave? Sorry, I don't want to jump over on your.
Sure, yeah, that if you want to read it, that'd be great.
Yep. Yeah, so has there ever been any discussion about the 15 days and the 16 days on tier 1? So in the spring, I believe the board did discuss this, and there was a lot of back and forth around, particularly with the shortage and posting, the issue of having to post for 60 days if you are wanting to renew a tier 1 license. Ultimately, the board has decided not to make modifications to that right now. Or permanent modifications, I should say. There's a couple of things in terms of being able to apply or post earlier that they would encourage folks to do. There's some temporary things that have been done, but in terms of like a long-term removal of that isn't something the board has discussed yet. Right now, most of their resolutions or things that have been done have been a short-term addressing, but as you all know, the teacher shortage doesn't seem to be as short-term of an issue as perhaps we thought or expected. If you all remember, for some of this, particularly the CTE is where that conversation came up in the spring. But that's kind of a separate, we don't have to dig into that, but that's where that conversation came up in the spring. Maybe one other thing that would be worth, I would say, making note of is that you mentioned the new state job board. Thank you, Dr. Stumpf. We also are finalizing, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, our contract with the new vendors for the teacher marketing and outreach campaign. So many of you are aware of Elevate Teaching and the work they did previously. And this was money granted by the legislature for marketing and outreach. And so this will be the next phase of that work. And we're hoping to focus a lot more, now that we've done kind of the campaign work and the design work, on some of the more traditional marketing aspects of, you know, social media ads and things like that. So that's something to be on the lookout of. We're also hoping to have some better connections. And this is actually Dr. Stumpf's recommendation to the board, between the vendors who do the state job board, the vendor that does the work around teacher marketing outreach campaign, and ProServa, who is the vendor for our online portfolio platform. So we're hoping that in the coming months, as those groups meet and those contracts are finalized, we'll have more things to outreach to you all and to your districts, because we really are trying to elevate not only how we're recruiting and getting people in, but I think this year, with, I would say, 3 new staff members, a new portfolio platform, or finances for that portfolio platform, and the outreach campaign, we're really trying to elevate these innovative pathways and bringing people in. We have found that a lot of folks who come in as second career teachers are needing those pathways. And so if you aren't aware, we've been working very hard and closely with ProServa with this online portfolio platform. Historically, the portfolio has not been a very viable pathway. It has not had the investment it needed. And so that's one thing that the board has been interested in. And then I would say my vision is very interested and supportive of it. So I just wanted to make sure we share that as well.
There's another question here in the chat. Is there any conversations about addressing the special education teacher shortage, trying to figure out alternative programs for recruiting special education teachers? There has been a big shortage in rural Minnesota.
It's an excellent question. So most of that discussion has been through MDE and their Educator Workforce Center, which was newly named a couple months ago. As you may know, they were given $30 million particularly to aim and grow your own funds towards getting people enrolled in teacher preparation so they can be special education teachers. So that's the biggest conversation. It's mostly been through MDE's, the funding and recruitment efforts on their side. We're working closely with them under their Assistant Commissioner, Angela Mansfield, to support them in that and provide data. And then, of course, the board is working with our teacher preparation providers on that as well. I do know that the board is very cognizant of the fact that there is a shortage and there is a need. And so, as many of you know, the state is working to address federal requirements around this without also causing any undue kind of issues that would prevent us from getting or keeping people in classrooms for special education. But that's kind of where things are at right now. So most of that funding and the work to recruit and get people in the pipeline or keep them there has been routed through MDE. And so we're working with them on that. And I think they'll have another round of funding available in the spring for that as well.
Another question. Is there any potential relicensure that we had linked to the completion of the READ Act training requirements for teachers?
That is an excellent question. So to that, I can say I have not heard that. I know that Rep. Edelson is working on that legislative language right now, and that she has been in consultation with us to see about that reading audit process I've mentioned. I do know that there's been some discussion of what current renewal requirements can do around literacy, but again, the legislative committee and board has been cognizant of the fact that we don't necessarily want to add new requirements, given we're in a teacher shortage and teachers are already carrying a lot. So I haven't heard that this will be a new requirement by any means. And I think that that is something that the board would probably have to wrestle with if that was the case. But so far I have not seen any language that would add that as a requirement.
If there's no other questions, maybe I'll do my quick wrap up and toss it over to Dr. Bailey for hers. But I just want to thank Dr. Bailey. Again, I've just been in this position since July, and I think she's been in her position for a short term as well. And I can't remember if it's under a year or around a year, but done a lot of great work working with the legislators and with our board and with community partners as well. And so I think we're in good hands with Dr. Bailey's leadership. And again, reach out to me if you do have questions, and I'll try and get you pointed in the right direction. Or just share what the board is thinking. But thank you for coming to this session. I'll turn it over to Dr. Bailey for her final comments.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that. Thank you all for having us. This is a group that I have been meaning to be able to meet with. And so thank you, Dr. Stumpf, for helping get us in contact and to get this together. I want to reiterate something we mentioned earlier, that the board and I are really interested in better communication and kind of being more transparent with our community partners, which would include you all. So if there are any questions you all have or any policy issues or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's the information that helps us so we can do what's best for everyone, but we don't know what we don't know. So I really appreciate you having taking the time here to be here today. And I genuinely would love to hear more from you all, even if it's something very specific to your context and your district. I would still love to have that conversation. So thank you all.
All right. Well, thank you, Yelena and Kurt, for presenting today. Again, we'll be sending out the copy of the slides and session recording shortly after today. So thank you for being here, and have a great rest of your Monday.
Thank you.